Welcome back, everybody, to the Minecraft Short Stories podcast. This is episode 73, and in this episode, I will be telling a listener story submitted by Dragon Queen. This story, as always, was submitted through my website, minecraftshortstories.com, on the Submit a Story page. So if you have a story or you want to write one for the podcast, maybe get read, then that is the place to do it. You can find the link in the description or just, minecraftshortstories.com. Anyways, one quick note for the patrons over on Patreon who listen to the Minecraft Short Stories Prologue podcast. There was not a new one for this week. There won't be one for a little while more because I'm preparing a lot of big stuff for the Prologue podcast and for this podcast. So look out for that. Thank you guys for being patient, and I cannot wait for you guys to listen to what I have planned. Anyways, another thanks to Dragon Queen, and let's get right into this story. Just before the story begins, I'd like you guys to know, Spotify for Podcasters, which is the podcast service I use, they have removed the in-site editing tools, so now I have to add in my own music, make sure it fades in the background and stuff. So this first story where I'm learning how to use an audio editor may be a little bit rougher than usual, but hopefully this will end up increasing the quality production of the podcast now that I'm doing it completely manually. So I just want you guys to know there may not be background music if I can't figure out how to do it, but thanks. The Wither's Revenge by Dragon Queen. Part 1. The time had almost come. Alex glanced to her left, where Steve was busy sorting their gear. They had acquired a solid set of diamond armor each, complete with bows and arrows, swords and potions of regeneration, fire resistance, and strength. Though Alex was confident that the materials they had worked so hard to get would be enough in the battle, something about the third member of their party had been giving her an ominous feeling in her gut, one that she was having a difficult time shaking off. As she tended to the campfire, she sat in silent thought. Steve and Alex had met Edifix while in the Nether, scavenging for nether wart to brew their potions. He seemed to have been wandering through the corridors of the fortress, as he had come across him looking absent-mindedly out of one of the fenced windows at the expansive lava lake surrounding the area. He had turned around when he saw them, nodding his head in greeting. His small smile hadn't met his eyes, which were like dark pits. He wore a kind of armor Alex had never seen before, a dark purplish black color. Alex was uneasy when she and Steve first met Edifix, but he soon proved to be surprisingly pleasant and well-tempered. At the Nether Fortress, he had asked them what the purpose of their journey was, and Steve had answered, saying the words Alex shivered with anticipation to hear. We're attempting to defeat the Wither. Edifix had smiled again, responding that he had also been working towards that goal. Alex had glanced at Steve. Why don't we battle together? He nodded. You're welcome to come along. Edifix had accepted the invitation and accompanied them back to the overworld, where the three of them had finished preparing for their upcoming adventure. Now Alex watched as Edifix strutted up to her and Steve with that same emotionless smile he'd had back at the fortress. At this point, Alex had gotten used to it and didn't think of it as anything suspicious. Maybe Edifix wasn't used to company, as he said he had stayed in the Nether most of his life, where humans were scarce. Maybe he felt like he needed to smile so as not to seem weird, and it was just unnatural for him. He'd certainly been through a lot, Alex observed, as she glanced at the dark scar running the length of his face and down his neck. According to Edifix, he'd had that scar since he'd battled a piglin brute in a bastion a year ago. Steve approached Alex and Edifix, carrying a shulker box full of all their gear, freshly inspected. Setting down the box, he took a deep breath and held up his diamond sword in the light. This is it. Nothing more needed to be said. All three of them knew exactly what came next. Over the course of the next day, the companions made their way to the Nether portal many adventurers used, as it was near multiple villages and easy to access. It had been a ruined mess when it was first found, but someone had eventually repaired it, and it was now the center Nether hub. Shops surrounded the portal, selling Nether-related materials, items, and weapons. 2 guards stood by the entrance in case any ill-meaning entities attempted to pass through and cause a commotion. Decked out in their gear, Steve, Alex, and Edifix arrived at the portal and took a final look at the bustling scenery behind them. Finally, Alex saw in anticipation, it's been months since we started preparing for this. It better be worth it. Part 2. Steve was ecstatic. Scared, but ecstatic. The Wither was one of the most dangerous entities ever to exist. He and his friends were about to battle it, and hopefully defeat it. As he stepped through the portal's glowing purple haze, he closed his eyes and willed himself to stay calm. This was not going to be an easy battle. The netherrack platform that all travelers saw as they entered the main nether portal came into Steve's view. He waited as the others appeared through the mist after him. Alex looked excited but nervous, and Edifix, he looked completely at ease. Steve wondered if there was something else in play with this strange character he and Alex had met on their nether war excursion. Edifix, with his unusual name and unusual backstory of living in the nether most of his life, definitely made Steve curious and slightly unnerved by him. But he's done nothing wrong, Steve thought. He sighed to himself as they silently walked the path leading to the Wither's fortress. Everyone knew about the Wither, how it was undefeated, terrifying, and only a few had lived to tell stories of its immense strength. Its fortress wasn't exactly hidden either. By taking a path directly from the Nether Hub's portal, one could reach the fortress in less than a day. It had been years since the last adventurer battled the Wither, the stories of the monster from the Nether dwindling in frequency over time. Steve knew the battle was likely to result in his own defeat, but he was determined to try for victory. He and Alex had trained for months for this day, and they weren't going to back down now. When around 3 hours of walking had passed, the slight tint of nether brick reached Steve's vision. The fortress was minutes away. Alex inhaled sharply beside him, her features glinting with sweat from the heat of the lava all around them, and possibly the nerves of what was about to ensue. Steve was nervous as well, and he tried to take deep breaths to calm his racing heart. As they reached the fortress's towering walls and fiery columns, they readied their weapons and prepared for the final battle. The first thing Steve saw when he entered the fortress was a throne made of what looked like the same material Edifix's armor was forged out of. No one sat upon it. The room was eerily quiet, unlike what Steve had expected. Alex, standing to his right, was scanning the room, trying to map out where the Wither might be residing. Could something have happened to it during the long years of silence in this fortress? Just as Steve was about to suggest they look around for any signs of the monster, a hoarse shriek echoed throughout the chamber. He froze, slowly moving in a circle to locate the direction of the noise. Another shriek, sounding closer this time, and Steve was ready to act quickly if he needed to. Alex tensed one hand on her enchanted bow, and another grasped an arrow from her quiver. A moment of complete silence. And then the Wither emerged through an opening in the upper wall, a whirl of black bone, its 3 heads hissing and smoking as it found its new enemies. But just as soon as it spotted them, and Steve and Alex aimed their weapons, it paused in an almost surprised way, stopping midair. Steve lowered his sword, unsure. Confusion etched Alex's face. "You remember me," said Edifix. Steve whirled around. "What?" Edifix grinned vindictively, genuine satisfaction on his face. "You had no idea?" He walked directly up to the Wither, which was still floating in the same place. Steve watched as realization and horror flooded Alex's face. "It was you," she quavered. Then stronger, angrier. "You spawned the Wither. You tricked us." She clenched her fist around her bow. Steve knew that Alex was right. Edifix had spawned the Wither, his whole living in the Nether backstory. That scar on his face was probably the doing of the Wither when it had first spawned. But now, it was on Edifix's side. Now Steve and Alex would have to fight both Edifix and the Wither. Edifix actually petted the Wither, and then, "I can't believe you offered to let me join you. Give me the perfect opportunity to sabotage your plan. I can't have you killing my pet." Steve swallowed bitterly. "You're a traitor and a liar. Now fight us like you've surely been itching to do for the past week." He felt Alex stand next to him, and knowing she, at least, would never betray him, gave him just the right amount of courage he needed. He stared straight into Edifix's eyes. "You're not going to take away our opportunity like this. Go ahead, unleash your monster." Part 3. "My monster," Edifix chuckled, sitting on the throne. "Okay." He turned to the Wither. "Go on, destroy them." The Wither, as if breaking free from a trance, launched itself at Steve and Alex. He watched the 2 warriors dodge the Wither's explosions and try to hit it, maneuvering every which way. He realized, as one of Alex's arrows lodged in the Wither's ribcage, and it lurched painfully, that they might actually have a chance of victory. That would certainly not do, he thought. He stood up from his netherite throne and took out his sword forged out of the same material. He may just have to do this himself. Alex was breathing heavily as she shot arrow after arrow at the Wither's restless form. It dodged, shot back, lurched, and whirled as she frantically tried to aim her bow. "Come on," she thought, willing herself to focus. She chugged a strength potion, hoping it would give her a little more accuracy. But she must have been a little too focused, as she didn't see Edifix slowly approaching her from behind. Just as he raised his sword to attack, she caught the motion out of the corner of her eye and quickly rolled to the side as he swung at the place she was standing a second ago. He turned and growled, irritated. "Not today, creep," Alex said through stronger breaths. The strength potion must have worked. Before Edifix could prepare another strike, she smoothly aimed and shot an arrow directly into the gap of his helmet. Edifix stood there for a moment, then slowly fell to the ground. But Alex had no time to celebrate, as the Wither was still trying to explode Steve, who was leaping all over the place to avoid the smoking skulls launched at him. Alex joined Steve in the thick of battle, where minutes went by of hurried dodging, running, and striking. They were losing energy as their breathing became labored, and their attacks less accurate. Steve ran beside Alex, avoiding the explosions behind him. Alex, he gasped. "It's weakened. A couple more hits to the head might do the trick." Steve was right. The Wither was moving slower now. If she could hit it with one more arrow... She stopped running briefly to load her last arrow. Aim, and... now. The arrow sailed through the air and successfully hit its target, the Wither's rightmost head. The monster roared. "Your turn, Steve," she shouted. He nodded, positioning his sword so he could throw it. The Wither came closer, and Steve took the opportunity, throwing the diamond blade with all his might at the Wither's middle head. Alex watched the Wither shriek one last time before falling to the ground, truly defeated. It exploded in white smoke, dropping only a star-shaped, glowing crystal. Steve walked forward and picked up the star in amazement, holding it up to see it better. Alex approached him, still panting in exhaustion. "I wonder what it does," she said. "It's beautiful." They destroyed the Wither. Steve still couldn't believe it. "Oh, and Edifix," Alex began. Steve gasped. "Where is he?" He had completely forgotten about him in the midst of battling the Wither. "Over there," said Alex casually, pointing to a spot near the middle of the chamber. Edifix was lying on the ground, and then he disappeared in a puff of smoke. Steve laughed, impressed. "Good job." The end. Thank you guys so much for listening, and also thank you to Dragon Queen for submitting the story and for letting me be read on the podcast. Also, thank you to all the other listeners who have submitted the stories over the years. All of you guys write amazing stories, and they're fun to read and I'm sure listen to. So, thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys inside the next episode.